Say, dirtbag. This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow, and you are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast.
The original Justice League has become a memory.
I am resigning from the Justice League.
What's going to happen to the League now?
We rebuild. From the ashes of that great conflict, a new team has arisen. A much, much bigger team.
Each of you brings something different to the table.
Old friends, new heroes. And as usual, plenty of bad guys jumping up to get beat down.
Calm down, and I'll let you go.
How about you kiss my ass?
Watch out, evildoers. There's nowhere to run. Because this year, they're all around you. The League is unlimited. An all-new original series, starring every superhero worth cheering for. And then some. Justice League Unlimited.
Where am I exactly?
Among friends.
There's strength in numbers.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 206 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, with me as he always is for each and every episode, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, Liam. Liam, welcome to yet another review of Justice League Unlimited as we continue here in the month of April, reviewing a series, as we mentioned at the start of the month, that we hadn't quite gotten to in quite a bit. So it's been a pleasant surprise to come back and review some of these great season 1 and 2, well, mostly season 2 for this run here, Justice League Unlimited episodes. But yeah, we've got another interesting one here that is a pseudo sequel to perhaps the biggest episode of the original Justice League series here.
That's right. It's sort of a more direct follow-up to the events of the 3-part episode Starcrossed, which we covered way back in our 100th episode. So you can go back and listen to that in the archives if you are so inclined. But yeah, as far as this goes, this is, as we'll get to in the plot, this is a little bit more follow-up on where we find Shaira. We have previously also covered the events of Wake the Dead, where she returns to the Justice League and returns to being an active hero in the League. But this one sort of deals more directly with her role, not only as a member of the Justice League, but also as her ability to lead as one of the founding members of the League, as she's sort of her and this small task force are set out on this adventure together.
That is correct. And before we jump into our 4 categories of plot, visual and animation, music, and voice acting for this week, we will, of course, tackle the official Internet Movie Database, IMDb, Synopsis, brought to you by The Pod Tower. Go over to youtube.com/thepodtower, and you can actually hear that aforementioned 100th episode of the DCAU Review on there. Not only that, but our full catalog, including bonus episodes and some of the other great things that we've done, other past Justice League Unlimited episodes, in addition to great content from our friends over at Watchtower Database and Tim Talk. Liam, this episode originally aired back on the Cartoon Network on June the 18th, 2005, meaning we are coming up here in just a few months on the 17-year anniversary of this episode's debut.
That is right, Cal, and this is the synopsis for Hunter's Moon, which was written by Stan Berkowitz and Dwayne McDuffie, directed by Joaquin Dos Santos, with music by Christopher Carter and Michael McQuistion, and animation by DR Movie Company. And that synopsis reads as such. Shaira, Vixen, and Vigilante are lured into an ambush by Thanagarians seeking revenge.
Hey, short, sweet, to the point. I don't hate that one.
No, I mean it's you would think it being basically one sentence long that might be a cause for concern, but no, that is basically our plot here. As we can get into our categories here, starting with plot. It's an good old fashioned revenge tale, and we get a lot of character beats as well for not only Shaira but for a couple of the other Leaguers that are along for the ride with her in this episode.
That is right. Yeah. So we start off with the Watchtower receiving a distress call from some miners who apparently they're talking to Jean, and they're saying that their spaceship is being affected by this radiation. He's talking to them directly, and clearly the transmission is being affected by the radiation and keeps fading in and out. He's having trouble kind of hearing from them. And once they're talking through it and able to get a clear signal through, they realize that some of the apparently the radiation is coming from some very dangerous nth metal, which of course there's one Leaguer, the aforementioned Shayera, who is of course very familiar with that magical metal. And so as Jean is there and he's talking to this mysterious alien, we get John Stewart walking through the tunnels of the Watchtower, and he's surprised by an ambush from none other than Vixen herself. And Vixen is attempting to show a little bit of what the kids used to call PDA. She's down bad for John, and she's not afraid to show it.
Mari, are you crazy? Do you know what I could do to you with this ring?
Promises, promises.
Why the ambush?
Seems like the only way I can get your attention. We haven't gone out in nearly a month.
It hasn't been that long.
Not going to argue about it, Boo. You're taking me out to dinner tonight. I'm in the mood for Chinese.
The place by my apartment?
No, a romantic little spot I know in Beijing.
I'm not off shift until 1600 hours. That's breakfast time in China.
I like breakfast. It's a date.
Okay.
John, aren't you forgetting something?
Oops. This isn't the time or place, Mari. It's unprofessional.
And she's actually complaining that they haven't been on a date recently. John admits that he's fallen short in this area, and he's looking to make it up to her. So they make a date to get Chinese, but not traditional Chinese, around the corner from John's apartment. No, they're actually going to go to China, which I thought was a cute little thing. Of course, it makes sense. Why wouldn't the superheroes go to the actual country where the food originated, as opposed to just eating from the local Chinese food store? Love that. So they make a date for it, and as they're about to leave, John is reminded that he hasn't reciprocated the public display of affection, and well, he's upset that Vixen grabs him and decides to plant a big one on him, and he believes it's not professional and walks off, sort of leaving Vixen there kind of a bit bemused. So he walks in on Jean having the conversation with this alien, and it's at that point, once they see the metal and the classification for the metal, Shayera decides that she is going to volunteer to lead the team, and John Stewart decides he's going to lead the team and go with her. But we actually learn a little bit about how the assignments work here for the League. Jean states that because they're both founding members of the League, they are not allowed to go on the mission together for fear of there being confusion as to who is leading the team. So, of course, because the plot somewhat follows a sitcom formula here, who volunteers to go with Shayera? None other than Vixen herself, who Jean is more than happy to approve her going with Shayera and Vigilante to meet up with these aliens and determine just what's going to happen. But right before we get the opening credits here, we get a reveal that the alien, Liam, in fact, you might say it's a trap.
I'll go with you.
No, you won't. You're both founding members. I don't want there to be any question who's leading the mission.
Then I'll go.
Fine.
You gotta be kidding me.
Javelin 26 is ready for you on pad 9. I'll have the last team member meet you there.
Come on, then.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Vixen hasn't spent much time in space. Good experience for her.
You know what I mean. Sending my girlfriend and my ex on the same mission?
Difficult as it may be for you to believe, I don't take your love life into consideration when I make command decisions. I've assembled a rescue party. Help is on the way.
Signing off. I don't know how to thank you.
But I'm sure I'll think of something.
You might in fact say that. Is yes, we get our three-person team, of course, of Hawkgirl or Shaira, as we come to find out she
doesn't want to be called Hawkgirl anymore.
Yes, which I think there is a line about that at the end of Starcrossed, which I had forgotten until rewatching this episode. But yes, Shaira, along with Vixen, as you mentioned, and of course our third member of the team. Who else would you bring on a deep space mission but Vigilante, the cowboy with his little laser revolvers? But again, at this point, they just know they think it's a search and rescue mission. They sort of arrive on this planet, and right away, it seems like maybe something's amiss as Vixen kind of uses her animal totem to look around for any signs of a mining ship or any sort of interference. And they note that the scanners aren't picking up all of this supposed raw nth metal that seems to be putting this scout ship in danger. And so as they get out to investigate, as you said, Cal, here they figure out very quickly that it's all an ambush, and we, in fact, it's actually interesting how it's structured, because they don't show you who's attacking right away, so which kind of goes against that. We already know who it is, but they're kind of walking through this cave, and then we just see these blue lasers firing at them, and they're sort of on their back heels immediately and trying to retreat. And finally, it is Parandul and Lieutenant Krager and a few other unnamed Thanagarian soldiers reveal themselves as having been remnants of the Thanagarian army, and we find out a little bit of what happened directly after the events of Starcrossed, while I guess Shaira was putting herself into exile and living with Dr. Fate. We find out that the remnants of the Thanagarian armada that weren't destroyed by the Justice League and the Watchtower were called back to Thanagar to go into sort of one final desperate attack against the Gordanians, which is another famous DC Comics alien race there. And they, despite Frotalic's best efforts, the battle is lost, the war is lost, Thanagar loses, countless Thanagarian lives have been lost, and Frotalic ends up giving his own life, but not before sending off Parandul and Krager and the rest on one sort of lone escape ship to make their escape, before he sacrifices himself and seemingly makes this big self-sacrifice, but in the end it's all for naught, as the Gordanians have won, and that sort of sets up why our villains are here for this piece. And it is because they basically have nothing left to fight for other than revenge. And that sort of brings us to our conflict in our episode. Is not only is Shaira quite conflicted over whether or not she should perhaps just give herself up and allow her people to cast judgment upon her for her crimes, as you know, her actions, her refusal to let Fro build the hyperspace bypass that would have destroyed the Earth is sort of what led to Thanagar losing the war. And so while she is conflicted with that, we also sort of see very quickly that Vigilante and Vixen are also not quite so comfortable with taking orders from a Thanagarian. And as we come to kind of find out here, both Vigilante and Vixen were fighting the Thanagarians during that invasion, and both of them, because of that, and as we come to find out, Vixen has kind of another reason to dislike Shaira.
I don't know what you did during the invasion.
I fought them.
So did I, for all the good it done me. Filthy hawks caught me. Locked me up in a tiny cell, humiliated me. Your people, Hawk Girl.
I've told you not to call me. You've been hit.
I was in a fight, remember?
Why didn't you say anything?
Didn't want to raise no fuss.
If you don't trust me, you shouldn't have to follow me. I'm going to take Parandul's offer.
Turn yourself in. We've been through this already.
What do you care? I'm just a filthy hawk, right? When I look at myself, maybe I owe my people the chance to pass judgment on me.
You know, for the last few months, all I've been hearing is Shaira's so brave. Shaira's so tough. Shaira never quits.
Vixen.
I'm embarrassed to say that I was maybe a little jealous of you. But seeing you in action here, I'm thinking John must have been talking about some other Shayera.
You're really setting up a lot of personal issues, even amongst this big alien, hunter versus hunted story.
Yeah, there are all of these sort of plot threads that are sort of brought back there, and honestly makes sense based on the fact that these two heroes fought against a worldwide invasion, and they're now on this team with somebody that just because they're on the team doesn't mean that they automatically trust her again. So I did think that thread and bringing that back, the fact that not everybody is quite ready to trust her, and the fact that she still exhibits sympathy and empathy for these people that are trying to kill them because they're her people. And her first question was, well, what happened to Hero Talek? I thought, that really shows that even though we've moved past that Starcrossed event and they're doing their best to try and welcome her back and for her to have some redemption here, that this is a significant part of who this character is, and that the ramifications are still being felt throughout the entire team. So I do actually appreciate that, and that part of the story here. But as they're sort of struggling here with that, they have a brief interaction where they get away, but it's revealed, of course, that Vigilante has been hurt, so he's injured, and Shayera keeps trying to give herself up in an attempt to allow Vixen and Vigilante to get away. Now that she knows sort of the plot is to seek revenge, we get Krager and Parandul sort of really making it clear that they blame her for the downfall of the Thanagarian people at this point. So so we figure we figure at this point there actually that Vixen has her own plan rather than allowing Shayera to give herself up. She comes up with a way to sort of con Krager and the rest of the Thanagarians to capture her. And as she's being captured, she says, well, I will give you Shayera in exchange for my freedom.
Wait! Don't shoot, please!
I can't think of a good reason not to.
Because I can give you Shayera Hall. You still want her?
I'm supposed to believe you would give me your teammate? I'm brain damaged, not stupid.
My animal senses are 100 times more acute than yours. I could find her with ease.
And why would you want to?
You mean besides saving myself? Shayera and I, we want the same man.
Enough of this.
Wait. I believe her. Lead the way.
Either of you got a med kit?
We've got an analgesic projector back in the ship. After you help us.
If you want me in condition to track someone over this terrain, you'll take me to it right now.
Do it.
And they bring her back to their headquarters so that she's aware of where it is. And it's at this time that Shayera and Vigilante are off on their own, and we kind of get this conversation between the two of them. A very, very intimate, touching conversation between the two of them, and we learn a little bit more about Vigilante. This is really the first episode we have starring Vigilante, right? This is before the Shining Knight Vigilante two-part or crossover starring episode.
Yes,
so that's in season 3, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is really an opportunity to kind of get this lesser known B, C, maybe even D list superhero under the spotlight. So I did appreciate that. But anyway, so he does mention that there is some sort of this prejudice that is revealed in their conversation, and they actually refer to the Thanagarian people as the Hawks a couple of different times in this conversation. So you do build tension between whether or not Vigilante is going to sort of allow his prejudice and his anger and frustration with how he was treated during that time allow him to work with Shayera. But anyway, as Vixen is captured, she's brought back to the Thanagarian headquarters, and of course it's a double cross at that point, as she was simply there pretending that she needed medical treatment, but instead she was there to just collect some medical equipment, hopefully to treat Vigilante at that point. So it's at this point that Shira decides that she is going to give herself up, and she decides that she's going to fly up and exchange herself, because at this point Vixen's taken too long, and she says Vigilante and Vixen are not who they're after, and the Justice League will come looking for them at some point. So she flies off and has an interaction with the rest of the Thanagarian people, where we see that they've still have Vixen at this point captured. But even before this, there was a neat little scene where Vigilante gets to show off a little bit of his skills and trap setting a little bit.
Bears that you got the drop on me, partner. May have spoke prematurely on that. Now you and me are going to have a little confab concerning the location of your spaceship.
Yeah, we get a fun little sequence there as he's seemingly trying to get a drink at the ravine, and one of the Thanagarian soldiers drops down behind him and seemingly has him dead to rights. But then the old the rope around the ankle and lifts him up into the tree. So a very old school tactic on this sort of modern alien warrior, but it still works. And Vigilante is able to interrogate the Thanagarian, and that sort of sets up our final little action beat here, as we have Shira going to give herself up to the rest of the Thanagarians, and with Krager sort of holding on to Vixen, and as Krager sort of lets Vixen go, as Shira gives herself up, looks like all hope is lost. But then here comes Vigilante flying the Thanagarian ship, and then this was sort of set up a little bit earlier that he is not 100% ready to go when it comes to his javelin piloting. So he's even having even more trouble trying to fly this alien Thanagarian ship that he's never worked with before.
Would you care to surrender now, or shall I have Krager do something unseemly to your friend?
Let her go, and I'm yours. No tricks.
I'm sure. Drop your maze, and we have a deal.
Who's flying my ship? Console thing busted horse thieving alien control panel which can't nobody work proper. I'm coming, darling!
He's able to fly it well enough, at least, to catch Vixen and keep her from falling to her death, and that sort of sets up our final action fight here. As Shira is sort of face to face with Krager, and then we have Parandul sort of going after Vixen, and they have a fight, which we'll certainly talk more about in visuals in a minute here. But that sort of sets up our final beat there. As Vixen's able to get the best of Parandul, knock her out of the ship, and then Shira kills Krager. That's what happens. Yep. She disables the power cell powering his big robot suit. We didn't necessarily mention this, but Krager is he's in this giant robot suit, and it's very clear that he is mentally unwell, and we get a little bit of expository dialogue reminding us that he is the way he is now due to Jean forcibly going into his mind during Starcrossed to gain some information from him. So he's permanently unwell. He can't fly under his own power anymore, but all he really remembers is that he hates Shira, and that he wants revenge on her for what he blames her for, which is the death of Herotalik and the failure of the Thanagarian army. So he and Shira have this this battle, and it looks like he's got her dead to rights, but then yes, she's able to remove the power cell powering this robot body, and he falls a very, very long way down. And that's the last we see of him, and really of all the Thanagarians. We then go to the next scene, which is the Thanagarian ship arriving back at the watchtower, as we see the injured vigilante finally receive some medical attention, and we see Shai sort of seemingly just completely John Stewart off as they go off, seemingly maybe to, you think you're going to get your like the end of Rocky 3 or something here, where they're about to go a few rounds in the gym or something, but instead they are having a meal together in the cafeteria at the watchtower, and sort of commiserating over the funny quirks of dating one John Stewart.
Not to mention his taste in movies.
I know. Old Yeller? What's that about? And he's such a Marine. You should see his underwear drawer. He folds his socks.
I have seen his underwear drawer.
He still has feelings for you, you know.
I know.
Is it mutual?
What's not to love?
Funny thing about me. Whenever I start a book or a movie, no matter how bad it is, I just can't stop until I get to the end. So even though John and I have only been together for a little while, well, I just like to see things through.
On guard.
As we sort of wrap up here, we find out that Vixen is very much aware that John still has feelings for Shaira, and Shaira admits to also still having feelings for him, and Vixen tells Shaira that while she herself is also aware of that, she is still interested in seeing things through with John, and doesn't plan on stepping aside and letting him go just because there might still be some attraction between him and Shaira. So that's sort of where we end our episode, with them sort of agreeing to disagree over who should be with John, and sort of forming an odd friendship as we wrap up here.
Yeah, the final line of the episode is "on guard," as apparently, I guess, all is fair in love and war at this point. So we've had our fair share of war when it comes to Hawkgirl, so bring on the love, I guess. But yeah, I guess we can get into our plot scores for this week, Liam. I'd say for this episode, it's okay. It's interesting because it had to follow up, I feel like, what is arguably the best episode of the Justice League, and you're following up with what honestly could have and perhaps should have been a multi-episode arc. But I understand this season was the Cadmus arc season, so this is sort of shoehorned into it, and maybe setting up a second storyline when they were unsure whether or not this was going to be the final season or not of this show. Would have been hard to do, but I feel like it's a little bit too jam-packed. I feel like Herotalik, his death, while okay, that's fine to kill that character, but it feels almost like a waste not to have a Hero versus John Stewart 2, like as brutal as that first fight was, or maybe some interactions between Shaira and her coming to grips with the fact that she, once loved this guy, and now he, the Thanagarian people are suffering because of her choices, and so I think it's interesting that they chose not to use Herotalik in this episode as well, when he was obviously the biggest, perhaps the biggest antagonist in that Starcrossed episode. But I feel like the expectations were unreasonably high, unfortunately, for this episode, and they may not have ever lived up to them. I think plot-wise, there are some interesting things. Of course, that you get the, as I mentioned at the start, like the sitcom aspect of the ex-girlfriend with the current girlfriend, and they have to work together, and there's this constant, self-beating that Hawk Girl, with the guilt that she has to deal with, does to try and, make up for her mistakes, and wrestling with whether or not she's going to sacrifice herself for these other people. And I don't know. There's a lot that happens, but it also feels like somewhat of a rush job, because it's only 22 minutes. And some of it seems a little goofy with the Krager storyline. Krager being a robot man now with a messed up brain feels very strange. Yeah. So it's a lot of stuff. And I think there's some good parts of it. And I think there are some interesting threads, but I didn't feel like this one was necessarily a home run. So for all of those reasons, I ended up giving plot just a 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went 1 point higher. I went 6 out of 10. I like the overall setting of it. It's sort of I guess it's a bit like Predator in that sense, is the the soldiers go to the alien world and are suddenly attacked and everything like that, and the sort of the cat and mouse games are interesting. And I think, and maybe you pick like 2 of these elements, like the Vixen and Shira thing. I think adding in the vigilante part, where he's sort of talking about how he, your people did that, and he's talking about being locked up by the Thanagarians and pointing, your people did that to me, and all of that with Hawkgirl. I think that is interesting. The idea of Hawkgirl having to kind of work to earn back the trust of the other superheroes that she either directly or indirectly in some ways betrayed, as she betrayed everyone on planet Earth. So I think there's certainly interesting stories to be had there. The as Jon Stewart lays it out, the sending his ex with his current girlfriend on a mission together, that's an interesting thread. The idea of the Thanagarians coming back for revenge, I think is a fun idea. But as you said, I think maybe this could have been, if you had pushed this one maybe to season 3 and done it over 2 or 3 episodes, I think it could have maybe had a little bit more room to breathe, and you could feel like you were getting a little bit more out of it. Because while certainly Perandul and Krager maybe get, or at least Perandul at least gets a little bit more to do than she did in the original Starcrossed episode, it does feel like at the end they're still sort of their plan is undone by fisticuffs for the most part, and I guess Vigilante does outsmart the one unnamed Thanagarian thug, but other than that, it does feel like it just breaks down into some punching by the end, which for the emotional weight of Shira, considering giving herself up and whether or not she owes her people her loyalty still, or who is she really loyal to, and all of that stuff. I think there's a lot of interesting themes there that all kind of get compressed because we're moving on. We're not gonna really talk about this anymore, and we're gonna just move it on. And again, we do get more follow up on the Shira, John, and Vixen love triangle in the next season. But as far as this idea of sort of the rest of the league being untrustworthy of her and things like that doesn't really come back into fray. So yeah, this is kind of the end of that. So all things considered, I pretty much am in agreement with you. I think there's definitely some fun elements to it and a lot of good ideas and threads to pull on here. I also like, this is probably my last beat on plot that I have before we can move on here, but I like Jean being like the stern father figure, and I think we saw this before with him in Wonder Woman in Hawk and Dove, where he's kind of lecturing her about going too hard on a criminal or something. And here we have him not only lecturing Shira about how she isn't pulling her weight as a team leader, as a founding member, but then also has to kind of put John in his place when he's upset that he's put her and Vixen on a mission together. So I like Jean as the overworked den mother who's just really fed up with everything as we approach the end of this second season here.
Yeah, I do like that. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. So some interesting stuff happens in this episode because most of it takes place on an alien world.
Mhm.
But yeah, what did you have as far as visuals for this week's episode?
Yeah, I will say I felt like we could have gotten some cooler stuff, like more aerial battles, and they do kind of do a bit of explaining of that because obviously two of our three leaguers can't fly, so Shayera is down on the ground with them for most of the episode. So they do have a note about how the Thanagarians aren't in the air because they're trying to track her and the rest of the league. But yeah, I don't feel like we got enough like aerial action. We do get that scene at the end there with Shayera and Krager sort of wrestling through the air and Vigilante flying the ship. But yeah, I wish we could have seen more of that. But yeah, overall, I think like the background designs and everything of this world are very, it's very bright and colorful, and it's not you're in this sort of alien jungle for most of it. There's a couple different scenes that are set near this stream, and I think they did some really cool techniques of using different reflections. There's one shot of Shayera where she's sort of contemplating whether or not, again, she should turn herself in, if she deserves to, just call herself a hero and be part of the Justice League. And she looks down, and it's just that you see her reflection with the moon behind her, sort of rippling through the lake. So I thought the overall visuals of the world. It's mostly just jungles and greens, and then you have like sort of this blues and oranges in the sky and everything, and then but I thought that was a really fun change of pace as far as an environment. And it's not the cities or or even like a desert or anything like that we might see in a given episode. So the change of scenery, I think, was a nice challenge, I'm sure, for the background designers, and created some interesting settings for those initial battles as well.
Yeah, I made a lot of notes about that, actually. I thought that, as you mentioned, the purple, the skies were purple, and there was a lot of pinks and corals and blues and all of that used in the different designs and the different alien designs of the trees and the ground and the water. And at one point they're sort of looking up, and you can see these castles off in the distance on top of these mountains or hills or something. And yeah, I thought that the backgrounds were actually the standout, because you're right, it didn't feel like it was a super weird sci-fi planet. There was still something familiar about it, but it was alien enough to stand out. And I think juxtaposed against the reds and the whites of the Thanagarians uniforms and the rest of the color palette that was used for the members of the league, I thought that it worked very well. But I will say that I have to call out the fact there's a lot of CGI vehicles in this episode. There's a lot of CGI Javelin, a lot of CGI spaceships.
Mm-hmm.
You get the battle scene where they're recapping what happened with a Thanagarian army, and that's all CGI ships. There's CGI ships when Vigilante steals Perindul's ship. So we get a lot of CGI, and it does not look very good, in my opinion, and sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. It at least moves a little bit better, I feel like, than it has in the past. But it wasn't as I guess herky jerky. It wasn't as much. It was a little smoother, I guess I'll just say. The frame rate seemed to move a little bit, but at times it felt like it just took me out of it. It's just like, this doesn't belong in this show. Why are these CGI models in here? But I will say, I have to give credit where credit's due. There is a point right where they land where CGI is used, and I thought it was used in a very effective way. Vixen sort of uses this, it's not heat vision, I don't know what else to call it, but she uses the power of some sort of reptile, and they give you this POV shot of her, and she's checking for heat signatures. Again, maybe a reference or an homage to the to the Predator movies, in that
Mhm.
she's checking out the various forestry for life and doesn't see it. But the way that it moves, I felt like I'm 99% sure it was done with CGI, and I thought that actually looked pretty good, and it was done pretty well. It didn't take me out of it. It was unique enough. It moved quick enough where it was like, okay, that's pretty unique. I like how they did that. So strike with the hand and give with the other, I guess, when it comes to CGI for this episode.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I definitely did note, for whatever reason, it doesn't bother me in the where Protalic is giving his life. I guess because there's just so many of them, maybe you get used to it, and the background is mostly just black with the stars. It's just in space, so maybe it's easier to kind of disconnect that. But yeah, when the Thanagarian ship is flying, when Vigilante's flying it at the end, it's just really, it just does not fit in what is this otherwise drawn, or even though you're using digital animation techniques, of course, by this point. It's just the 3D modeling of this ship just really does not fit very well, and with the rest of this world. But as far as other things I do like, I really liked, and I always talk about this, it seems, when Joaquim de Santos is the director of the episode, but the one-on-one fight scene we get between Vixen and Parandul towards the end there, once Vixen gets into the ship, it's actually a great shot where she lands on the roof of the ship as Vigilante is flying it, and she sort of goes around to the side door and opens it up. You get like a shot of the door, and then she walks through, like almost like it's a Western or something like that, which I guess is appropriate with Vigilante along for the ride there. But then here comes Parandul flying in and knocks her, and they're having this battle, and just the way their movements are, there's always these extra little fluid movements, I think, and in a lot of these JLU fights we've noticed. And there's one where Vixen sort of has these claws that she goes to strike goes sort of strike Parandul with, and Parandul blocks using her wings, which I thought was really, really neat, and we don't really see that. I don't really think we ever see Shayera fight that way, so to see them be able to use the wings not only for flight but for defense purposes, I thought was really interesting. We get and then we also have Parandul just straight up using Wolverine shtick.
Yeah.
She has these spiked gloves, and then the spikes on her knuckles, 3 of them shoot out into these long metal claws, and she attempts to stab Vixen with them. So yeah, I think that final fight is quite a bit of fun. And then yeah, I think the despite it being kind of an odd treatment for the episode, I think I do like the design of Krieger's robot suit. It's real kind of weird and clunky, and feels like maybe something they just sort of slapped together because they don't have like a full armada of technology behind them anymore. But he's sort of just this big clunky robot suit throughout the episode. So I think there's some fun stuff, and as he's sort of going after Shayera at the very end of the episode there, and Shayera, again, is really struggling to pull out this power cell on the front of his suit. I think there's some fun to be had there, as I mentioned, in the little bit of aerial fighting that we do get. But yeah, I think there's definitely some high highs, but maybe I do think the CGI hurt it a little bit, and again, maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more fancy aerial fighting, but that's certainly more of a nitpick than a strong criticism there. I ended up settling on an 8 out of 10 for my visual score.
Nice. I went a little bit lower. I thought, and this is one of the critiques, I thought that everybody looked a little bit off model. People seemed a little bit more angular than they usually are, taller, thinner, lankier, especially Vixen at times. I felt like her body was a little bit elongated. At one point there's a scene, I think it's right when Parandul is recounting what happened to Thanagar. They kind of give this profile shot of Shaira and Vixen, kind of they're talking and listening, and you just see Shaira's eyes, and her eyes are something that you would see out of Eastern animation, a very anime style, like humongous eyes. And it's fine. I think it's pretty. If that had been that way through the entire episode, and I feel like her features were a little bit more exaggerated than we had seen in the past couple of episodes where she had her mask off. But this one scene, it was just like, it stood out to me, and I was like, it's just a little bit off model, and it's not consistent with the rest of the episode. Yeah, and there were times where, and I don't know if it was intentional. Maybe it was supposed to be a result of his brain damage. But Gregor's like cross-eyed in a couple of scenes, and it was like, is that on purpose? Is he supposed to be cross-eyed? I'm not sure. But yeah, so I didn't love the visuals as much as I would have, I think, if things had been a little bit more on model. But yeah, still not that far off from you with a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I have to go back and look. I feel like more often than not, if it's not a Coco episode of JLU, it seems like it's mostly Dong Yang Coco or this DR Movie Co. I feel like DR Movie Co. is the one where we're seeing more of the, like, it's not fully off model in the way that like some of those early Batman animated series episodes would be, but I do think there's some inconsistency. And then I don't know if this is on the animator or the storyboards or the directors. There's some very like leery, lewd shots of Vixen in this episode. Like both in the and in the opening scene, they are trying to play that she's trying to be sexy and seductive to John and be romantic and all that. So I kind of got it. But then there's also a scene where when she tricks the Thanagarians into taking her back to the ship, by feigning that she needs medical attention. There's like another shot there, and I was like, I'm kind of surprised we got away with that, with the woman with those proportions and getting like that close of a shot of her assets, so to speak. There, like I was a little surprised that one, it would be in there, and two, that it kind of lingered on it. It's probably only like 2 seconds in actual time, but it's just not the type of thing that you normally saw in these shows. So I think it did stay, whether or not it was completely intentional or just just a coincidence. I couldn't tell you for sure, at least not in the second occasion. But I was just like, wow, they're kind of lingering on shots like that a little bit longer than they might normally. Usually at least it pans up and down or something when they're trying to get across the ladies being, trying to show off the attractive ladies on these shows. So it's just interesting. I was like, oh, that's pretty unique as far as a choice made by, again, I don't know if that would be on the animators or the director or the storyboard artist or who exactly would be responsible for that. But I did notice that there's a little, the cameraman seemed the cameraman, quote unquote, was a little distracted, it seemed.
A little pervy happening there. Yeah.
I
noticed that as well. All right, Liam. Well, let's move on to our next category of the day, and that is going to be music. And I think I missed it when you were saying at the beginning. I assume the dynamic music partners are responsible for this week's music.
That's right. We have Christopher Carter and Michael McQuistion specifically named. So 2 of our 3 dynamic music partners. So I got to be honest with you, Cal. I don't have much for music this week. Didn't notice anything bad. Again, I don't think we don't get much of the electric guitar JLU music, I feel.
No.
It's more reliance on, I guess, and maybe this is because it's bringing back these old foes from the original Justice League series. So maybe they thought they would score it more traditionally in that way. So you get your more traditional strings and things like that. But the only really musical note I had is I think they do bring back some music from Starcrossed when the Thanagarians first reveal themselves, when the Leaguers are hiding behind the rock, and then Parandul calls out to her, and they look up and they see the whole squad of Thanagarians standing before them. It felt like they brought back some of the Starcrossed music there, but Yeah, other than that, I'm going to be honest. I don't have much to say about the music. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't feel like a lot of it stood out this week.
Yeah, the only notes that I had, at the beginning of the episode when Parandul removes the helmet and you get the sort of the reveal right before the credits, there's some dramatic music that played there that kind of and that may have been part of the or might have a theme that's similar to that what was used in Starcrossed. But other than that, the only other note that I actually paused and I was like, okay, that's actually a pretty neat beat was when Vigilante shows up in the culmination of that final battle with the ship to save Vixen that's falling from the sky. And he gives off a yeehaw and right before or after he's like fake cursing, talking about how he can't fly the ship itself. And he's like muttering something in a very southern United States accent, and the music for that final bit there I thought played really well. There was some good percussion. It is definitely more traditional in the way that it sounded, with strings and horns rather than the guitars. But that, and I would say when there's a point where Vixen jumps in, I think when she initially saves Shayera from Krager. There's a where she kind of calls on the power of the elephant or rhinoceros or whatever it is, and then jumps on top of the robot at that point. There's a nice little interlude that plays there. But yeah, I didn't have anything. I think it's what exactly the episode called for. I didn't recognize a particular theme for any of the characters, which would have been cute to, and maybe we'll hear something in a follow-up Vigilante episode, but nothing that stood out as far as an individual theme for Vigilante or Vixen, and not really anything that was a callback for Shayera that I took note of. But I think the music's good. I think it's not great, but it's not bad either. It does exactly, I think, what it was called to do, and for those reasons I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just one shot lower. I went 5 out of 10 for, I think, all the reasons you just mentioned. I think it's a solid job. It does a good job of adding to the scenes. You get that dramatic tension, but as far as any sort of standout single pieces of music, I didn't, like I said, didn't have much to go on other than that initial reveal of the Thanagarians on the planet. And again, what else you would expect other than, as we talked about, kind of laid off the electric guitar and the more traditional rock music for this week, which which also, again, we talked about it certainly in the original Starcrossed, and at least in parts in this one, there's certainly a Star Wars feel to the soundtrack. And certainly when Fro is sacrificing himself, he basically is blowing up the Death Star.
Sure.
So I don't know if we mentioned that in visuals or not, but it's a big round planet-sized ship that he flies his ship through. So there's certainly some, I guess, more like an epic space opera feel to the soundtrack rather than that traditional sort of rock action guitar music that we might get in an average episode of JLU.
There you go. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our final category of the day, which of course is voice acting. Not a huge cast. I guess it's larger than last week's cast, I suppose, but we do have some returning voices from the aforementioned Starcrossed episode. We also have some pretty notable names that you might know from a pretty popular sci-fi television show. Let's talk about this week's voice actors.
Yeah, so normally we don't really mention the players who don't play a named character, but I will just mention as a fun little bit of trivia here, David Barrera is playing one of the other Thanagarians who doesn't get a name, but that would be the husband of Maria Canals Barrera, aka Shayera herself. So a fun little bit of getting a spouse of one of our main actors in there to do a fun little cameo as a soldier here. But yes, as far as our main villains of the piece, we do have Hector Alexander returning as Lieutenant Krager. As we've mentioned, he's sort of, brain has been melted by Jean, and then he's also, of course, stricken with grief, as there's this very clear unspoken love that he had for Rotalic in Starcrossed that is again sort of lightly touched on here. But yes, we have the great Hector Alexander, a lot of famous roles. Definitely one of those voices that even if you don't know the name, when you hear him speak, you recognize him. He did in fact play Bane in the Mystery of the Batwoman movie at one point as well. So yeah, it's interesting because he sort of played in the original in Starcrossed as this sort of sniveling, plotting, second in command to Rotalic, but then here he's mostly played, I guess, for a little bit of comic relief. He's sort of this oafish, confused old man who's just angry and sad and kind of barely remembers why, and is kind of not sure what exactly he wants, other than that he wants to kill Shayera. That's like the one piece of his old self that's still there.
Yeah, it's an interesting. He has to play a character with brain damage. So I think he does a fine job. I think that it's somewhat played for humor at times, and for what's asked of him to do in this episode, he does a fine job. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about this character, this is the end of this character. As you mentioned, he did. So yes, we will certainly cover his performance later as the man who broke or wanted to break the bat, I guess. But yeah, this is there's not a whole lot asked, and there's a lot of grunting, and other than his line about Jean messing with his brain, I didn't think that it was particularly memorable, but that's not his fault for this week.
You took Commander Talic from us, Shayera, and your friend, the Green One, did something to my mind. Something bad. I miss Commander Talic. I miss being able to think without pain. But no one's going to miss you.
Someone who does get a lot more to do, and actually it's funny if you listen to the commentary track on the Starcrossed episode, Bruce Timm had actually mentioned, and I know James Tucker has said as much as well, that one of the main reasons they wanted to bring back the Thanagarians for this episode was because they were a big fan of Elizabeth Pena, who plays Parandul in this episode, and felt like she didn't really have much to do. She's very much a Captain Phasma before Captain Phasma in that series, and that she looked really cool, but didn't really have anything to do across that three-parter. So they had the idea of wanting to bring her back, to not only because the character looked cool, but because they thought the performance by her voice actor was good, and she does get a lot more to do in this episode. She is sort of the ringleader of this motley crew of Thanagarians, these stragglers who are left still fighting the good fight, even though the war is over here. And she does have a good, like, sinister edge to her when she's, when she first pulls the disguise off after she's done talking to Jean, and then when she's sort of laying out the telling Shayera to give herself up, and sort of recounting the heroic death of Rotalic and everything like that. I think she does get a lot more to do, and I think she does a good job with it.
Parandul?
Friend of yours?
Birds of a feather.
Did you really think you could get away with betraying the entire Thanagarian Empire?
Hold up. I thought we were the ones she betrayed.
Sounds like she betrayed everybody, cowboy.
You helped the Justice League destroy my hyperspace bypass. Only to stop you from killing everyone on Earth. That bypass was our last hope. Without it, we were helpless against our enemies. Because of you, the Thanagarian Empire lost the war.
Yeah, she knocked it out of the park. As you said, not a lot to do in that original Starcrossed episode. For them to take what they and who knows, maybe stuff was cut out of the original Starcrossed episodes that left a great impression, or that would have left a larger impression on the audience as well as those behind the scenes. But the fact that those behind the scenes and in charge decided it was so good to bring her back and give her an opportunity to really get an entire episode's worth. Again, I think this is a character that would have benefited from a multi-episode story arc, because she was used so little in that original episode that the impact of who this is feels like it's a little bit like, who is this again? But that, of course, doesn't have anything to do with Miss Pena's performance. I think she does a great job, and that does leave me wishing that she either had a larger opportunity in that original episode, or in this, that her performance wasn't limited specifically to just this episode. So yeah, I think she does a really good job for what's asked of her. And she's sinister. She has a motive for wanting revenge. I think her interactions with Krager, where she's reminding him that they are there, and that's their whole goal is to get revenge on Shaira, and it is great. I think she does an excellent job for this week.
Absolutely, I totally agree there. And then as we break into our heroes here, in a supporting role, we do have a couple of our original leaguers. As mentioned, we do have Carl Lumbly, of course, as Jean, and Phil Lamar as Green Lantern. Like we said, not a lot for them to do, although as you mentioned, that we do get that very humorous bit of GL being very upset with Jean for sending Shire and Vixen on a mission together. So that's a good bit of fun there. And then I do, again, I like Jean as sort of demanding that Shire step up. I think it's interesting to see him as this guy who's controlling all this giant 55 Justice League, or constantly sending people on missions and picking and choosing who's going where and all that. And I think even though most you could say that Jean is kind of sidelined for a lot of these JLU episodes, because he's just sitting up in the tower, but I think he always there's always a little bit of poignance when he does show up, and especially when he gets to actually show a little bit of emotion and interact with some of those other original leaguers that he's known for a while here in the show. And then speaking of our main leaguers for this week, though, we have the returning Gina Torres as Vixen, who we previously talked about in Wake the Dead here. We get to see her not only do a little bit with Phil Lamar's Green Lantern, but she gets to do a lot of bouncing off one of her former live action co-stars, as you alluded to, Cal. Not only was Miss Torres in the original, the much beloved Firefly series that was pretty short-lived, but was sort of this cult favorite space western show. Not only did Miss Torres star in it, but playing the voice of a vigilante this week, we have Mr. Nathan Fillion, he's one of those like nerd gods. I think if you are into nerdy pop culture stuff, you probably like him for at least one of the roles that he's done, whether you know him from Firefly or from some of his other acting work, or he of course goes on to voice the Hal Jordan Green Lantern in some of the DC animated films more recently. So a big career, and like it of course at one point you have to get him in there. So having him not only come in and play a cowboy in space yet again here as vigilante, but having him play off one of his former co-stars in Miss Torres is a nice bit of touch, and I'm sure, as we often say, was not an accident when Andrea Romano was casting this episode that they decided to bring Nathan Fillion in.
No, reset your hyperdrive vectors.
Nobody likes a backseat driver, ma'am.
You need another 20 hours of flight time before you're certified.
And some of us are already rat certifiable.
Vigilante, you got a problem with me, we can take it to the gym after the mission's over.
No problem, ma'am. Resetting the vectors.
Yeah, I'm sure that was not they looked at that, they said, okay, these guys are going to have some good chemistry, let's write an episode where they have the opportunity to interact with one another. And for Miss Torres, I think the episode started off a little rocky for me. I think the interaction with her and John in that opening scene felt a little wooden at times. I don't know, maybe I know she was trying to be, calm and seductive, but it came off a little wooden. With that said, though, I think the rest of the episode, she absolutely crushed her performance. Specifically, I think the interaction at the end with her and Hawkgirl is just grade A material. Not only the writing of these two rivals sitting together and discussing dating John from different sides, but then also the sort of like, the back and forth that they have about who John still has feelings for, whether or not and Vixen realizing that he still has feelings for her, asking Shire if she still feels the same, and then her sort of comeback of saying, well, let the best person win, and I'm gonna let this play out and see what happens. I thought that was that was great, and I thought that I was like, all right, this rounded this out perfectly and ended up being a really strong performance from her. Nathan Fillion's super funny. He gets a chance here to play up really a Southern stereotype, but does it in a cute and like comedic way. It's done in sort of like this adorable, innocent sort of way. This guy, like I said, he's like fake cussing a whole bunch. He's like says pardon the expression, or pardon my French, and then says like dadgummit or something, something super tame. So playing this all shucks southern guy. And he doesn't have a whole ton of a lot of lines to deliver in this outside of those sort of quips. But I think his interaction with Hawkgirl, where he's sort of talking alongside Vixen, explaining, how he was made to feel by the Thanagarians as he was fighting against them. And then later on, when she decides that she's going to give herself up, there was some opportunity there for him to show some more quiet poignancy and not just be the yuck quip machine that he seemed to be for the rest of it, which I feel like he did a good job doing. But as I said, we know we have some more performances from him down the road with his character. So and including an episode where he basically stars in the episode. So definitely looking forward to seeing that an episode designed to be a vehicle for his character. But yeah, I guess that probably leads us to the arguable star of the episode.
That's right. So you touched on it a little bit there, but yeah, I think the strongest part in this episode is definitely Maria Canales-Barrera as Hawkgirl / Shira, of course. And I think, as you said, you can maybe argue that it's not the most exciting start with the Vixen and John stuff, but really from when you move into that scene where with Jean and sort of lecturing Shire, and then them going off on the mission, and Vigilante is sort of, as you mentioned, it's kind of all three of them interacting throughout the rest of the episode. Maria Canales and Gina Torres and Nathan all sort of interacting with each other, I think is really where a lot of the charm comes in. And some of the emotion, that where Shire is really, you really do feel that conflict that she's feeling, where she isn't sure really what her role should be. Should she just give herself up, and she's willing to sort of sacrifice, and maybe that's the way for her to redeem herself and to truly be a hero, is to just give herself up to the Thanagarians. And then you still have some lighter moments, as you mentioned, with her interacting with Vigilante, or when they're still on the Javelin at first, and Vigilante is sort of arguing with Hawkgirl about how he's flying the Javelin, and Vixen has a line about how, men have fragile egos, and you need to talk to them a certain way in order to get what you want, and very just matter of factly, Hawkgirl says, "I don't do that." and Vixen says, "Yeah, I've noticed," or something like that. But I like that very quick setting up the dichotomy between the three of Hawkgirl being still sort of bullish and a bit standoffish and uncomfortable in this role as a leader, and then you immediately have that sort of contrasted by this Vigilante who's certainly heroic and courageous, but also maybe a little bit out of his depth here. And then you have Vixen who is already sort of dealing with the mistrust of Shira because of her former relationship with GL, and then that sort of added on to once the Thanagarians reveal themselves, and that sort of internal conflict. So yeah, I think our three main leaders, but especially Maria Canals Pereira here, really get a chance to stretch their muscles and do a little bit of everything. Do a little bit of comedy, do a little bit of the more, kind of angry, tempers flaring moments between the three leaguers and between her and the Thanagarians, and then finally, her sort of deep conflict and her regret, because these Thanagarians, even though she ultimately decided to side against them and save the world, those were still her people, her friends, the people that she knew better than anyone, that she had sort of betrayed, and that betrayal did lead to Thanagarians losing that war. So she has the sort of the weight of multiple worlds on her shoulders, and I think she does a great job. Miss Canales again does a great job portraying that conflict. Along with some of the lighter moments, she really has to kind of hammer it home when it gets to those more dramatic moments, and I think she kills it here.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as you mentioned, not only the drama, but the sort of chiding at the end when Vixen is making the joke about how John is such a Marine and how he keeps his underwear drawer. And she says, "Oh, you should see his underwear drawer." And she comes back with, "I have seen his underwear drawer." And like a pin could drop and you would have heard it like hit the ground with the reaction or the non-reaction, the stunned silence that Vixen sort of has. But the way that she delivers that line was just perfect. I agree. There's some classic Hawk Girl in it, but there's also growth of the character and some warmth. And obviously she, as we mentioned, she gets to show not only care for John, she also expresses emotion in her care for her people and for her Italics. So yeah, she gets the lion's share here. And I think that this might be one of her best episodes to date that we've covered. Hard to beat her performance in Wake the Dead, just because of how emotional that episode was. But I think it's a pretty strong performance from her for this, for a balance of different things that she had to cover here. So yeah, very, very strong performance from her.
Yeah, totally agree. And like I said, I think this is that final interaction, and you already touched on it, but just the way not only the dialogue is written, but the way it's delivered when she mentions that Vixen tells Shire John still has feelings for you, and Shire admits that she knows, and Vixen sort of asks her, do you feel the same way? And Shire just says, "What's not to love about him?" Like, I think that there's like just some really simple things, but the way it's delivered, it feels like these are real people and real characters who have experienced a lot together and are having a real conversation. It doesn't just feel like, oh, you could have given these lines to any of these superheroes and you could have interchanged them and it wouldn't matter. Like, it feels like this is a very good episode of, even though as we said, we felt like there was maybe potential more from a story perspective as far as hitting those character beats. Our voice cast really did a great job of hitting really all those various emotional beats throughout the episodes.
Agreed. Yeah. So for all of those reasons, I ended up giving voice acting a pretty strong 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went the same way. I went 8 out of 10. I would have liked, and again, this maybe goes back more to a plot criticism and how much is stuffed into this, but I think I would have liked to have seen more for Hector Alexander as Krager to do. Like we said, he is funny. Like the few lines he gets where he's like, "But we are gonna kill her, right? That's why we're here." Like it is funny hearing the way that that Parandul is kind of Elizabeth Pena's character is kind of manipulating him a little bit and sort of trying to keep the Thanagarians on mission, even though they're all sort of, most of them aren't really sure that this is what they should be doing, and with this crazy brain damaged robot man that she's trying to wrangle. I think there's some fun bits in there, but a little bit more for those characters to stretch the legs maybe would have resulted in a higher score. But an 8 from both of us, certainly nothing to sneeze at, as another really, really strong week from our voice cast.
There you go. All right. Well, that will begin to wrap us up. So let's total up our scores here, Lamb. Totaling everything up for this week, I end up with a middle of the road 25 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm just a couple points higher. I ended up at a 27 out of 40. So yeah, not too big of a difference there. As we get into rewatchability, I think it's a double thumbs up, because it's the sort of continuation of the Hawk Girl, Green Lantern, Vixen triangle, which, as we said, will come back in a pretty big way in the following season, and also obviously is continuing on from where we saw these characters in Wake the Dead and before that in Starcrossed. So I think it's a big deal from there. And then because it is sort of created to be a direct sequel to that big epic episode, albeit on a much smaller scale, you don't have a full scale invasion this time around. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a thumbs up. And even though this wouldn't necessarily be one that I would classify as an all-time great episode, it's it's still an easy to watch, enjoyable 22 minutes of superhero fun. So yeah, I think this is because of it being a solid episode, and you mix in the story stuff, I think this gets 2 thumbs up for me.
Hard to disagree with that. Yeah, I debated giving it the old 1 thumb up, but I think for the love triangle reason alone, you kind of have to watch this to kind of fill in some of the blanks there and recognize that Vixen and Shayera kind of agree to just coexist, and may the best woman win John's heart, I guess. So yeah, I agree with you. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Don't forget, you can support the podcast by liking us on our social media pages. You can head over to @DCAU Review on Twitter and Instagram. You can like us on there, follow us on Twitter. As I mentioned, Liam runs our Twitter page, does a great job. We have an amazing time interacting with everybody on in the DCAU community. Not only, we don't just talk about DCAU stuff on there, though. Liam is an avid comic reader, much I think a little bit more than I am, and just we have lots of conversations about what's happening in the world of comics and all kinds of fun stuff over there. So if you're not following us, if you have a Twitter account, check out @DCAU Review. Send us some feedback. Let us know what you feel about this episode. Don't forget also, if you do listen to us on a podcast app and you have not subscribed to us, please do so. And if that podcast app, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, allow you to leave a review, 5 stars helps us out. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and you can leave a little blurb, heck, if you've left a review before and you feel generous enough to support us and leave a second one, you can even do that. But leave a little blurb, let people know what it is that you enjoy. Maybe it's our witty repartee. Perhaps it's our just our booming voices. Whatever it is that you enjoy, let the good people at home know what it is that you enjoy, because it helps out the old algorithm. You got to feed that algorithm. So not only that, you can support us if you wish. You listen to your podcast perhaps on YouTube. As we mentioned, head over to youtube.com/thepodtower, like our videos, subscribe to the channel, and give a listen to our friends' content as well on there. We've got some great stuff from our friends there. Liam, you can also support us by buying some merch if you want to. Head over to DCAUreview.com. Click out the shop tab, click on the shop tab, or you can also check out the link at the bottom of the podcast if you want to support us directly. Liam, next week is our final Saturday in the month of April. I guess the April showers have come. Mayflowers will soon follow after. But before then, we have one last episode, and it's going to be an exciting one.
Absolutely. And, we already did sort of, even though it was a non-traditional start to the month, we did our Elseworlds at the start of this month. But so rather than just do another non-main DCAU episode review next week, we thought it might be time to dust off the old character spotlight series yet again here. And we thought this time we're going to try something again. We're going to tweak it a little bit, see what we think and what our listeners think. But we thought we would focus in on not just one character, but mostly one character, but some of his supporting brethren in green, as it were, as we will be doing a character spotlight on what we are calling John Stewart and the Green Lantern Corps Volume 1 here, which we'll look at the first appearance of the Green Lanterns in the DCAU, that being in Superman the Animated Series, and then John's debut in the first episode of Justice League, and then sort of the rest of his adventures throughout that first season of Justice League. So, and not just John and Kyle Rayner either. There's some other Green Lanterns making an appearance very early on in the Justice League series. So, lots of members of the Green Lantern Corps that we'll get to chat about in our next week's Character Spotlight.
Right, one of the most popular characters in the Justice League era, and certainly a fan favorite. So looking forward not only to discussing John Stewart, but some of his Green Lantern counterparts next week with you, Lee. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
Talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.